Okay, we've covered the basics, and now let's get started. Let's get to work. The first thing to understand is the similarity and relationship between spoken word and improvisation. Our brain functions very much the same in both of those actions. So let's look at how speech works first. Let's say what I want to do is talk about and explain to you what this thing is. And immediately, as soon as I have the urge to communicate this information, my brain calls from my memory words that go with it. Mallet, vibraphone, yarn, rubber ball, rattan, flexible, and so on. And, those words are all, connected to this item in my memory, and they're all stored in my memory. We also have grammar, because it's not sufficient for me to explain this just by spouting random words. We also have to be able to arrange them in a logical sentence structure to better understand. And that's what grammar does. We learn language normally as our primary language as a child, both by imitating and listening and testing, trial and error. And we also study it in school and learn even more detail about how grammar works and so on, always adding to our vocabulary and our skill with grammar as we grow up and as we become increasingly educated. There's also content. When I explain something, there's a certain order to it. The first statement introduces it. I'm going to tell you about this mallet. And then each sentence that I add adds to the story, tells how it was made, what the purpose of the different materials are, and so on. So it makes then a full explanation, a little story is told. So we have vocabulary, grammar, and content. And the same is true when improvising. For improvisers, the vocabulary is the notes, the sounds that we hear. We learn the names of the notes and the sounds of the notes, and it also includes scales and chord outlines. So these basic sounds of music are stored in our memory, and we can call them up when we need them, depending on what the circumstance is in the music at that moment. We'll call the right notes up to play then. There is also a grammar to music. Just as conversation is constantly moving forward in time as we talk and add more to it and so on, the same thing happens with music, of course. We're in time, we're moving forward, and there is movement and motion as the harmonies change from one to the next. The way chords resolve, there are rules about which chords lead to which chords and what kind of movement it is and so on. Just like there are rules of grammar, there are rules for harmony and for music. And we learn how that works, and that also gets added to our memory so that we can then make musical sentences that sound logical to people who are listening. And finally, there's content. Just as in words, when we're explaining something or telling a story or whatever, we do the same thing when improvising. Our improvisations are fragments of melody that are connected together, and as you listen to them, you follow from one to the next and one to the next, and they follow a logical development, and then you have a solo that can hold people's attention. So we have the same three elements of language as in improvisation as we do in spoken language. So give that some thought, and we're going to look at ways that it's put into practice.